Last week, we began a numismatic journey through Mount Olympus, where the 12 main gods of the ancient Greek pantheon reside. If you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend you pause this video, look down at the video description, and watch part 1 first before coming back here and watching this video. There are lots of amazing coins in part 1, and in that first episode, I also make a point as to why and how to assemble your own collection of the 12 Olympian gods on coins, as it is one of the coolest ways to get started on ancient Greek coin collecting. So today we're looking at part 2. Let's continue with 6 more coins featuring the Olympian gods. We are once more joined by the amazing Triform collection, who so kindly provided the footage of his collection for us to enjoy. So yeah, lots of chronological variety today. The coins we're looking at spawn approximately 350 years of history. That's pretty interesting because it's an opportunity to see different artistic styles in the same collection. And before we get started, a couple of quick announcements. First, you should consider subscribing to our newsletter. In it, you will receive weekly updates on the channel, market reports of the best ancient coin auctions happening that week, interesting articles and videos on coins and ancient history that I find interesting, and much more. Check out the video description of this episode. The very first link available will be the subscription page. And I also want to hear from you in the comments section. Write down which is your favorite Greek god or goddess and why. I always read the comments, and for the gods that people ask for the most, I will make a video exclusively on that god, going in a deep dive in his or her mythology, and of course feature coins that show this deity. This channel is not just mine, it's yours as well, so please, let me know what you like. Alright, now we can get started, and we begin with a god that was very well loved by the ancient Greeks, Dionysus. Now, most of us know Dionysus as the god of wine, of partying, of good time, up to a point of excess, really. And he shows up quite often on coins, which seems to be counterintuitive. I mean, weren't coins supposed to be this way of advertising authority, power, the idea of we need to be taken seriously? So why so many coins featuring a party animal like Dionysus? It would be a bit like coming up to that uncle of yours who likes drinking a bit too much and has a reputation for participating in orgies, and recommending him to a position in PR management for a very traditional firm. The two simply don't fit one with the other. Well, that's once again because we tend to be quite superficial with our understanding of Dionysus. Yes, he was the god of wine, but wine was deeply tied to prosperity, fertility of the land, and wine vineyards were a common sight and a source of nourishment for the Greeks, especially if you consider how freaking tough life was. You know, after a full day of work tending the fields, one of the things your typical Greek peasant could do to relax was just to sit down with his friends, chat, and maybe enjoy a cup of wine. And that idea of those special moments where you could find enjoyment, where you could laugh a bit, even after a tough day in a really hard life, that was also heavily connected to Dionysus. It's not like he was the patron god of the alcohol on that cup of wine itself, but more like the good moments that made life worth living. That's what he's about. We need to go a few steps deeper into the meaning of these gods to see how the Greeks saw them manifesting on their daily lives. So, as for the imagery of Dionysus on coins, he often shows up wearing a crown made out of wine leaves and grape clusters. So it's this lovely show of how this god was sort of like integrated with nature. Some coins also show his fun side, as his enjoying himself with a kantaros. That's a type of cup the Greeks used to drink out of. And the overall idea was to communicate the city had economic strength, it produced wine, it had prosperity, they could afford to enjoy themselves like Dionysus. It wasn't, of course, meant to show they liked partying, but more like they were so prosperous that they could afford celebrating and hosting festivals, because Dionysus blessed them with abundance. And here we have quite a big coin, a silver tetradrachma to illustrate the god. It comes from a city called Maroneia in Thrace, and it was made between 150 and 120 BC. This coin was a lot of money back then. That's 16 grams of silver. It commands respect just to hold this kind of coin. So it's actually interesting to see they picked Dionysus rather than a more authoritarian god to be shown on their highest denomination. On the obverse, we have this lovely portrait of Dionysus with a crown made out of grape leaves and what looks like a tiny bundle of grapes, or maybe those are berries. Quite a serious expression for a god supposed to be so fun-loving though. It's understandable when we consider that despite this god being all about fun and prosperity, he was still a god, so people who would have treated him with reverence in any religious ceremonies. And since the gods watched over the Greeks, Dionysus would be perfectly able to see the image of him shown on coins. That's what the Greeks believed in. They were omnipresent. So it was wise to show proper reverence to the god when making a coin with his face. Gods forbid you made a coin with the intent of honoring him and instead ended up making him angry. They wouldn't risk this. The Greek gods were super quick to take offense if you read their stories. As for the reverse, we have a full body image of Dionysus, fully naked with an athletic physique, which the Greeks considered the ideal shape of the human body. Once more, this choice was made, of course, to honor the god. I personally imagine Dionysus with a small pouch of fat around his waist, not too much, but definitely a little bit as a result of drinking and partying a bit too hard. But that's the point. This was a human defect, getting fat, for example. The gods did not have to suffer the consequences of their actions. Okay, so back to this image here. He is holding on one hand 2 spears and a cloak, and on the other a little bunch of grapes, once more making a connection to wine and prosperity. The legends make a written reference to the god and to the people who issued the coin, so a reference to the people of Maroneia coming from a fertile land. It reads, Dionysos Soteros, Dionysus the Savior, and at the bottom, Maroniton, from the Maronites. Okay, who's next? Artemis. Artemis was the goddess of the hunt, of nature, wild animals, the wilderness. She was also a virgin goddess, which in ancient Greek thought, at least for Artemis, it symbolized an idea of autonomy, of something that was not meant to be violated. And Artemis was tough. She was the sister of Apollo, which meant she must have been considered quite powerful, like her brother. So she had a relatively masculine air to her, more like a tomboy. Not that she was active or aggressive as Ares, for example, the god of war, but this idea of something that can't be tamed, that was independent. That must have been one of the reasons she often showed up on coins, because of that slightly masculine, untamable thing. And to illustrate Artemis on coins, we have here one of my favorite Hellenistic pieces. This incredible tetradrachma was struck in Macedon between 167 and 148 BC, after the last Macedonian king, Perseus, was deposed, and the kingdom of Macedon was annexed by the Roman Republic. Rome didn't immediately annex Macedon. Instead, they reorganized their territory into 4 separate administrative regions, known as merides. These were autonomous districts, each with its own local government. In reality, this was a move on the part of the Romans to more gradually transition to the annexation of Macedonia to yet another Roman province, but they did it in steps. On the obverse of this tetradrachma, we have Artemis with her hair nicely tied to the back of her head and the little bow and quiver strapped to her back. This image replaced the portrait of the last Macedonian king, but this wasn't a total departure in style from the coins issued during the monarchy. It was a calculated redesign. Artemis was placed within a round dotted border that we see here, resembling a shield. And this is basically a redesign of the last royal coinage under Perseus, which had shown the king in a portrait, so a portrait of the king framed in the same way around that shield. I'll put a picture on the screen with the two coins side by side, one with Perseus and one under the Romans with Artemis. Notice how the coins are very similar. This continuity was deliberate. It kept the format of the coins familiar. I mean, I love this coin. It's not only wonderful visually, it's very aesthetically pleasing, but it shows how tactful the Romans were when dealing with conquered peoples with a strong national identity. Instead of immediately crushing the old order, they slowly dismantled the monarchical structure and the sentiment the population must have had up to that point, only transitioning to full annexation when the time was right. Whoever saw that coin and didn't stop to think about it must have hardly noticed the change in image from king to goddess. However, someone who knew about politics, someone a bit smarter, must have noticed the message here. It was a powerful way of stating that Macedon was no longer a kingdom, and these were big changes, even if the coins were very subtle in passing that message. I mean, it was Macedon, it was the homeland of Alexander the Great, and there it was, overthrown by those Italians from the west. That was important. And when we head to the reverse, we have the same idea. Coins of Perseus and Philip V, his predecessor, show the crown made out of oak leaves, and inside the crown, one of the typical designs was the club of Heracles, his main weapon, and an inscription, Basileus Philippo or Basileus Perseus, so issued under Philip or issued under Perseus. Here in this new version of the coin, the oak crown was kept as it was. Same for the club of Heracles, but now we have Makedonon Protos, something like the first Macedonian, making reference to the first Macedonian Medes, the first of these 4 administrative regions established by the Romans. Once more, a subtle visual change, one that wouldn't be noticed by those less attentive to detail, but something big and important for those who understood about politics. Now, this coin is incredible, really. It's so full of political messaging, and it's just wonderfully made artistically as well. And today's video is brought to you by L5, the new ancient coin marketplace. L5 is a platform developed by coin collectors for coin collectors. It offers the lowest transaction fees on the market, from 5% down to 0. No listing fees or undisclosed reserve prices, and you can choose between buying and selling coins through its auctions or its fixed price lists. The most important idea behind L5 is generating an environment of trust between people. You can buy, you can sell, you can do both if you want to, all within a system of transparency and accountability between its users and the platform. Apart from a lifetime guarantee of authenticity in case any coin sold on L5 turns out to be a counterfeit, the platform works with a group of renowned experts on different fields of ancient numismatics and a body of expert moderators, with the objective of creating an environment of high trust where every single coin is reviewed by more than one person and curated by an input from the community. I think their concept of collaborative accountability, low fees, and transparency is a revolution to the ancient coin market, and I can't recommend the L5 enough. Give them a look. I personally think this is a wonderful concept that the ancient coin market was in need for. Visit l5.com. Now let's get to Hermes. Since this channel is all about coins, that's an important god for us. He was the god of commerce, so we could say that he was indirectly maybe the patron god of coins as well. He was also the messenger of the gods. He protected travelers, tradesmen, thieves. Basically, Hermes was associated with this idea of like speed, movement, communication, quickness. Normally, this god is depicted as a young, athletic man wearing winged sandals. Sometimes the wings are instead on his head, on a typical Greek hat called a petassos, and he almost always holds a rod with a tip having 2 serpents intertwined. The Romans called this rod a caduceus, while the Greeks called it the kerykeion. and although he's not as common on coins as one would expect the god of commerce to be, it's not necessarily hard to find him on coins. Maybe he's scarce. If not his face, at least the little rod with the two snakes, it's actually a very common sight. And why would a city put Hermes on a coin? Well, duh, it's kind of obvious, he was the god of commerce. As we've seen in the last video, if you haven't seen, go watch episode 1. Now, there's the point. If the coins were first and foremost a symbol of authority, that's why more powerful gods like Zeus or Athena were shown on coinage way more often. Hermes, on the other hand, he wasn't so serious. He wasn't associated with rulership. So as a result, paradoxically, as he represents money, he isn't that common on coins because the concept of commerce, yeah, it was associated with coins, but people already knew that coins were associated with money. So the image of authority was more important. For our example of Hermes, we have this small tetrobol struck at the city of Abdera in Thrace. Maybe we need to go over the denomination first because it sounds kind of weird. So for those of you who aren't used to the nomenclature of Greek denominations and don't know what a tetrobol means, it's 2/3 of a full silver drachma. A drachma was divided into 6 obols, so a tetrobol, tetra meaning Greek for 4, was 4 obols, so 4 out of 6, 2/3 of a drachma. I know, it's a weird denomination, 2/3 of something. In any case, on the obverse, we have this wonderful griffin, the symbol of the city. A griffin was a mythical creature with the body of a lion and the head, wings, and talons of an eagle. It's a small coin, but still so packed with details. And you're gonna see some cool details on the reverse. So, the reverse. Finally, we have our god of commerce here, and good god, this reverse is spectacular. Very finely detailed head of Hermes here, even in such a tiny coin. So he's looking left, wearing the petasos, this time without his wings. We can see from his face that it follows that trend of depicting Hermes as a young man to pass this message of agility, of quickness. And just to make sure people know this is indeed the god of commerce, to his left we have the little kerykeion standing upright, his rod with the 2 serpents. The design, it's all inscribed inside the square border, and around it we have the name of the magistrate responsible for that year, for issuing the coins and controlling the mint. I like the touch that the engravers divided the legend in 4 parts, so 4 parts of the square, each part with 3 letters, all spaced out so there was an even distribution of the letters throughout the square border. This shows a concern on the part of the die engraver with visual balance on the coin. It reads, Epistates Hierophaneos, so issued under the magistrate Hierophanes. Alright, next Olympian. Let's look at the lovely Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility. Now, this is a rather rare goddess on coins. Aphrodite is, at least under the optics of coins, and in why would someone put her face on a coin, kind of similar to Dionysus. She represented fertility and procreation, this idea of a polis being prosperous. However, Aphrodite had a certain side of it which connected her to the idea of lust, desire, and desire can be harnessed for good. I think we all have had examples of how love or the desire for something led you to improve yourself and had a positive impact on your life. But most often than not, the excess of desire could disrupt your life. And that's why she isn't that common on coins, because her myth did not really relate to any symbolism connected to the original concepts of authority so important to coins, which is why she doesn't show up on coinage. She wasn't really proper to be featured here. Now, another reason why a particular god, especially one that did not represent authority like Aphrodite, could show up on coins, was in case a particular city had that deity as their patron god. That's exactly what we have here. This drachma was struck at the polis of Cnidos. There is a very famous statue of the goddess attributed to this city, the Aphrodite of Cnidos, quite an obvious name. This statue was famous all the way back in antiquity for its beauty, and it shows how Cnidos in particular worshipped the goddess. And since they loved her so much, showing her on their coins actually sounds very reasonable, as it was the symbol of the city itself, a sign of devotion to their patron goddess. So it was inseparable from the city's identity, so then it made sense to put her on coins. This is the single oldest coin we will be seeing in this entire coin set. It was struck all the way back between 465 and 450 BC, so around the early classical period. On the obverse we have the head of this roaring lion. The Greeks in the area that is modern Western Turkey, where this coin was made, often showed lions on their coins, so it was likely a symbol of their identity as Hellenes against the other peoples that lived in the area, like a way to identify this coin as being issued under a Greek authority maybe. Notice how these early coins aren't even round. That's awesome. This coin still has some stylistic remnants that link it to the very first coins of the Archaic period, made a century before this one was made, which were not round. Only really in the mid-classical period, so around like the 400s BC onwards, that most coins assumed the disc shape we associate with coins. On the reverse, it's even clear that this is a coin made in archaic style. This piece has this really high relief image of the goddess struck inside the square border. Whoever prepared this flan had no concerns with making it flat or round. It's more like a ball, a globular ingot with a couple of stamps. I personally love it. It gives the coin an even older look. The image of Aphrodite herself is quite plain. She's looking to the right in a rather serious expression. Her long hair is tied together with a piece of fabric around her head, and she has these really elongated eyes that are similar to what we see in other early classical coins. Surprisingly simple coin, and yeah, something I noticed, no legends identifying the city, no names of magistrates, nothing. It might have been that Aphrodite was just so tightly connected to the image of the city of Cnidos. It was something so well known by everyone that the city worshipped this goddess, that the simple fact that Aphrodite was on a coin must have meant it had to have been made at this city, removing the need to explain it with letters. That's fascinating. Okay, let's keep going with our Olympus. Now let's look at Hephaestus. He was the god of metalworking, manufacture, the one who took like raw, unshaped materials from nature and represented the applied human intelligence and effort to shape nature in their favor. I love the myth of Hephaestus. It's this connection to raw talent and dedication of doing a good job. After all, he was the god that blessed craftsmen. He's probably one of the lesser known of the 12 Olympians, but he ends up being one of those that better represent the concept of arete, of excellence, that the Greeks loved so much. He was so talented that most of the divine pieces of armor and weapons used by other gods were made by Hephaestus. And he's also a bit different. He wasn't beautiful like the other gods. He was in fact quite ugly. This might be one of the reasons why he's so rarely shown on coins. Yet, those imperfections were compensated by his talent, and he has a remarkable record of good behavior, especially when compared to the nasty things the other 11 Olympians often did. The rare instances when Hephaestus did something nasty against other gods, it was always only after that god did something nasty to Hephaestus. And for the coin representing this god, we don't have a portrait of the god himself, but rather one of his helpers. Hephaestus had some little helpers, called the cabeiroi, cabeiros in singular. In some myths, they are also the sons of Hephaestus. Cabeiroi were like the dwarves of the Lord of the Rings, like excavating deep inside the mountains, gathering minerals and collecting fuel for the great forges of the god, and helping him with his work. As we can see in this little bronze, struck in the 3rd century BC at the polis called Biritis, we have on the obverse the little Cabeiros with his conical hat. The dwarves at the Lord of the Rings all have curly hair, but Cabeiros here seems to have wavy hair instead, and he doesn't have a beard. Heading to the reverse, a pretty simple design. This coin must have been small change, it's less than 6 grams of bronze. Maybe that's a dichalcoi, or a tetrachalcoi at most. We have an olive wreath around the border of the flan, and inside, the Club of Heracles. In one of the stories explaining the origin of his club, it was made by Hephaestus, so it's another nice little reference to the god. And finally we have 4 little letters, beta, iota, rho, ypsilon, the first 4 letters of the city's name. So it reads Biri, so Biritis. Lovely little thing, tiny little coin but full of detail. And finally, wrapping up the 12 Olympians, we have Demeter. She was the goddess of agriculture and the fertility of the earth. And if you ever had a chance of reading how absolutely terrible a harvest failure was for any pre-industrial society, you know her being a goddess of agriculture. She was worshipped very fervently by everyone in ancient Greece. She basically represented sustenance in the most essential sense, the growth of crops, the cycle of planting and harvest, that little spark of life that made the seed sprout. It was all due to Demeter. And since she governed the success of crops, which were vital to every community, Demeter had many festivals and ceremonies dedicated to her all across the Greek world. On coinage, Demeter appears most often in regions known for their agricultural wealth, especially in the southern Italian peninsula, where this coin we have here comes from. This is a nomos from the polis of Metapontum, struck between 330 and 290 BC. Here's this wonderful bust of Demeter. It couldn't be any less than wonderfully made after all. We're talking about southern Italian Greek coin here. God, this region made such wonderful coins. She's depicted as this very serene, matronly figure with a crown made out of leaves and barley stalks, representing her link to agriculture, to plants, to living things. And on the reverse, once more, an agricultural motif. We have this huge wheat stalk, a motif very common for coins of Metapontum all throughout their history. Later on, when Rome conquered the region, it would continue to be a strong producer of food and a key provider of grain to Rome. Even after Rome conquered other bread baskets, such as northern Africa or Egypt, the southern end of the Italian peninsula continued being mostly an agricultural zone, as it was the region with the most fertile soil and best weather of the entire peninsula. To complete this rather simple reverse, we have the abbreviated name of the city, Meta, from Metapontum. These coins are not rare, mind you. You can easily get a silver coin of Metapontum at auction, which just shows how prosperous the city must have been in antiquity. And here we have it, the 12 Olympians in Greek coins. Which one did you like the most? Make sure to leave a like and comment in the video description. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, consider subscribing. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon. Let me give a special thank you to all of my amazing channel members and Patreons for their generous support. This channel would not be the same without your help. And if you would like to be part of this list, have early access to my videos when they are uploaded to YouTube, and a series of other perks, make sure to check out my Patreon page and my members tab on YouTube. Thank you very much. And we have a new tier for Patreon. Thank you very much, Caligula, for joining us. Your support means a lot to the channel.